Today, we are diving into a huge piece of legislation that is about to completely change the game for renting here in the UK. This is your guide to the new Renters Reform Bill. Seriously, whether you're a tenant or a landlord, the rulebook you've been playing by is being totally rewritten. And we're not talking about a few small adjustments. This is a massive fundamental shift. Okay, so let's get into the timeline. Now, while the exact date is still being finalized, the big changes are expected to land around 2025 or 2026. From that moment on, the way millions of us rent our homes is going to be running on a brand new operating system. So what's actually changing here? Well, these reforms, which people are calling the Renters Reform Act, are kicking off a whole new era. But to really get what's new, you've got to understand the old way of doing things, a system that's been standard for decades. You know the drill, right? For as long as most of us can remember, renting has meant signing a 6 or 12-month contract, all while knowing that a no-fault eviction notice could land on your doormat. Well, the Renters' Rights Act is basically taking that old rulebook and tearing it to shreds.
All right, let's start with the big one. The single biggest change, the one that's been grabbing all the headlines, we're talking about the end of so-called no-fault evictions.
And what's so interesting here is how clearly this lays out the shift in power. Under the old system, Section 21, a landlord could ask you to leave with just 2 months' notice, and they didn't have to give a reason at all. The new system completely gets rid of that. From now on, any eviction has to go through Section 8, and that means the landlord needs a valid legal reason, and just as importantly, they need the evidence to prove it. But, this isn't a completely one-sided deal. To make up for getting rid of Section 21, the reasons for a Section 8 eviction are actually being made stronger. So landlords will have very clear, legitimate ways to get their property back, like if they want to sell it or if they need to move a close family member in. And for tenants who are clearly in the wrong, we're talking serious rent arrears or antisocial behavior, the eviction process is actually designed to be more direct. So we've talked about evictions, but believe me, the changes go way, way deeper than that. They affect pretty much the entire experience of renting. So let's take a look at how the rest of the rulebook is being rewritten. First things first, say goodbye to that classic 12-month contract. All tenancies are now going to be rolling right from day one. This is a huge deal for tenants. It gives them incredible flexibility. They can give 2 months' notice and move out whenever they need to. Of course, for landlords, that means a lot less certainty about how long a tenant might stick around. Next up, there's a new referee on the field. The Private Renters Ombudsman is going to be a mandatory program for every single landlord. So if a tenant has a problem, let's say repairs that just aren't getting done, they can go straight to the Ombudsman. They'll get a free, legally binding decision. This new body can literally force landlords to act and even pay out compensation, all without anyone having to set foot in a courtroom. And to make everything a bit more transparent, there's a new property portal coming. Just think of it like a national database of landlords and all their properties. Everyone has to sign up, which should make it a whole lot easier for local councils to find and penalize rogue landlords, and for tenants to check that the person they're renting from is legitimate. Oh, and that's not all. Rent can now only go up once a year, and you have to get 2 months' notice. Tenants now have the legal right to ask to have a pet, and landlords can't just say no for no good reason. Blanket bans against families with kids or people on benefits, totally illegal now. And those rental bidding wars, banned. The price you see is the price you pay. Okay, so those are the new rules on paper. But, as we know, any big law like this is going to create ripple effects, and analysts are already starting to talk about some of the potential unintended consequences. And wow, this chart really paints a picture of one of the biggest worries. According to some surveys, almost a third of landlords are thinking about selling properties or shrinking their portfolio in the next couple of years. Compare that to just 7% who plan to expand. If that actually happens, we could see the number of rental homes shrink, making the competition for tenants even more intense. And this all leads to a really strange and kind of troubling paradox. It's summed up perfectly in this quote: "A law that's designed to give tenants more security could, in some weird twist, end up doing the exact opposite." This is what some people are calling the credit trap. See, in the past, if a tenant fell behind on rent, a landlord might just issue a no-fault notice and the tenant would move on. But now, without that option, a landlord has to go to court to prove the rent arrears. If the court rules against the tenant, they get a county court judgment, a CCJ, slapped on their credit file for 6 years. That makes it incredibly difficult to rent again in the future. So with this added risk, how are landlords reacting? Well, we're starting to hear stories that they're basically pulling up the drawbridge. People are reporting some unbelievably strict new requirements. Things like demanding proof of over £10,000 in savings, or flat out rejecting freelancers and gig workers. We're even hearing about landlords only considering households with 2 full-time incomes or requiring a guarantor for a single person earning 65 grand a year. And of course, the impact of all this isn't spread out evenly. These kinds of super tough checks are going to hit the people who already have it tough. Single parents, people with non-traditional jobs, and lower-income families. So the very people these reforms are supposed to help the most could actually find themselves completely locked out of the rental market. So after all that, what does this actually mean for you? Let's try to boil it all down and figure out how to navigate this new normal, whether you're a tenant or a landlord. Okay, here's the bottom line. For tenants, this new law absolutely offers more security from eviction and a lot more flexibility to move when you want. The trade-off, though, is that you might face much stricter screening just to get a foot in the door. And for landlords, evictions are now a more formal, evidence-based process, and you've got new compliance rules to follow. The big takeaway for them? Tenant screening is now more important than it has ever been. Which leaves us with the big $64,000 question. Was this all designed to create a fairer, better rental market? Absolutely. But is there a risk that on the way there, it accidentally creates one that's smaller and much harder to get into? That's the real question, and I guess we'll only find out the answer after this new era of renting officially kicks off.